honor to be here again, and I appreciate the opportunity. I have two topics of discussion this morning. The first, I'd like to introduce our upcoming Derelict Building Demolition program. We think this is going to be a valuable program in addressing some of the more blighted properties, both in our commercial and residential areas in the city. The City Council and the City Manager have a vision for our community that very much is in line with your vision as realtors. And that is to provide a community that's high quality from one end of the boulevard to the other throughout our residential and commercial areas, that raises property values, that promotes your business, and that provides the highest quality of life for our citizens and residents. With that in mind, we have a lean, fit, and trim organization. We're using every opportunity to obtain funding other than tax dollars to accomplish some of these programs. Our City Engineer, Director of Public Works, David Lawrence, has been very successful in obtaining a lot of grant funds for doing public projects that relieves the burden on our general fund from paying for those projects. I think we'll all agree in this room that the grant funding that was used as a part of the Village Improvement Program has just been outstanding. We see on social media that those improvements have made the village a destination point. We see the positive comments all the time. So we also have identified grant funding available for this demolition building program. We will be able to use this year an allocation of $50,000 from our Community Development Block Grant Program funding for seed money to demolish structures that we can't get voluntarily demolished or rehabilitated for a number of reasons. All you have to do is drive the west end of the boulevard, you'll see some of them. But there's others in residential neighborhoods that aren't quite as obvious, but are significantly negatively impacting the property values in those areas. So the idea is not to go to buildings that are marginal, not to compel people to demolish structures that can be rehabilitated. But we've identified specific buildings where I've had substandard building case files on these properties from anywhere from 10 to 20 years. And the property owners, because of financial considerations, financial constraints, or just the severe difficulty in trying to rehab the buildings, have left them derelict. And so that's going to be our focus with this program. Mr. Phillipson will appreciate the fact that we will be following all due diligence required by law with regard to this process. We have a very strict set of codes and rules that will govern how we administer this project. It involves first notices, second notices, third notices, office conferences, and then as a last resort, actually going to the courts to obtain an abatement warrant. And even then, once we get the court to issue us an abatement warrant, we then will take that to City Council, get their buy-in to the idea that this property does need to be dealt with. We've preliminarily identified our initial focus points for them. They're on board, but they still have the final decision as to whether to move forward, issue a contract for the demolition, and then proceed and award that contract. So it will all be done with due diligence. Our primary concern is the property rights of property owners, and those rules and regulations will be followed. So we're always concerned about our citizens, our property owners, and making sure that their rights are preserved and they get every benefit of due process. So with that, You should start seeing sometime probably in August progress towards addressing some of these properties. We're going to start some of the noticing procedures in May and June. The funding becomes available July 1, and then we'll move forward with the final legal processes where voluntary compliance can't be attained. So that explains that program. Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Mosley, I'm just trying to understand this. So would the property owner still own the property even though you demolish the building?
Yes. What will happen is as a part of the program, we establish a revolving fund where initially the city will pay the contract for the demolition, and then we are reimbursed from the CDBG funds up to $50,000 for this year. Those funds will go into an account that pays for the contract. We will then place a lien on the property to recover those funds. So it very much is a revolving fund to where we can use those funds once they're recovered for addressing other properties once we've expended the full $50,000. So it'll be a regenerating revolving account. But the property owner, they are private properties. Property owner retains ownership of the property. The only encumbrance is a lien in the amount of the demolition costs. Yes, ma'am.
So the grant can't be used by the homeowner, the grant is only used by the city?
I'm sorry?
The grant's only used by the city, not by the owner of the property.
That's correct. The grant is strictly for the city's use to issue contracts and pay the contractor for the actual cost of demolition. Norm?
Do you at the moment have a list of properties that are potential candidates for this program? I'd like to make sure I'm not on.
Well, for confidentiality purposes, yes, I do have a list. And if you want to discuss that matter on the side with me, as I'm aware of, no, Norm, I don't believe you have any properties on the list.
Are you afraid you're on that list?
Is the homeowner, the property owner, going to get any type of estimate of what it's going to cost to, because each one is going to be different, obviously. Do they get some kind of a number to know what the lien is going to be on the property, or is it just a random thing?
Well, it basically boils down to, we'll go through the normal bidding process to get at least 3 bids for the demolition costs. We won't even know that until we get the bids and we take that forward to the city council. So yes, once we have the bids and move forward to the city council, that's a public hearing, and we'll provide notice to that property owner that you still have one last chance.
Okay,
Here's what we've come up with as the bid cost, and we're going to go to city council for acceptance of this bid on specific date given, and up until that time that a contract is awarded and authorization to proceed is granted, you still have the opportunity to take voluntary action. Yeah.
Is the biggest focus more on commercial or commercial and residential?
I'm sorry, what was it?
Is it on commercial or commercial and residential? What's the focus on?
It's both. We've identified, in the presentation I made to the city council for this program, I identified 4 properties, I think. 2 were commercial, 2 were residential.
Do you think that $50,000 will cover the cost of demolition for those 4 properties?
It will be close on the 4 that I've identified, and I'm anticipating on a couple of them about 10,000, and then probably 20 or 15.
Commercials being much greater.
Yeah. So I believe that 50,000 will significantly address all 4 properties, if not at least 3. Okay. And again, as we're lean the properties, as those properties are sold, those funds then regenerate that account, and then we move forward.
Which that can take quite a considerable amount of time as well.
Yes. Yeah. By the time you go through the legal process, believe me, the property owner has due diligence and has plenty of time afforded to make a decision how they want to proceed. Yes, sir.
So all 4 of those properties are on Big Bear Boulevard? Is this really?
No, sir. Currently, 2 are on Big Bear Boulevard and 2 are in different residential neighborhoods. Yes, ma'am.
Could any of the derelict properties be historic?
No, that's the first aspect that we always look at is under state law with regard to historic building preservation. We get an assessment from our local historical society that requests, anytime I identify these properties, I notify our city planner, Janice Etter. She contacts the historical society and they do an evaluation of that property well in advance. Okay, that's the first program. And I'm going to revisit our real estate sign ordinance. Of course, we have Chapter 12, 1712 of the Municipal Code covers all signage. And I'm not talking about commercial signage in general, whether it's a commercial sign on your real estate building. I'm talking about specific temporary signage provisions in the